Hey guys, it's Frozenballz here, and welcome to another episode of the Minmaxer's Playground. Today's episode is going to be covering Nova, but before we get into it, there's a few things for housekeeping that I need to go through. First of all, I hope you guys had a fantastic Christmas and New Year, you were fed and watered, spent time with family and friends, and now you're good to go. Secondly, as I said on my stream, I wasn't going to be creating any new content until the new year came in for the simple reason that I was going to be busy with family, and now that was finally here, we're getting on with some more video editing in general. The episode was supposed to come out last week, but because I've been ill with the flu, I haven't actually had any chance to do any video editing or anything like that. So, slow recovery, but we're finally getting there. Finally, because this is the first video of 2017, and in the last week of when I was streaming and creating videos, I hit 3 milestones. I'm going to be doing a platinum code giveaway for PC or console, depending on whichever platform you're on. Entering the giveaway is quite simple. All you have to do is comment on the video, and you'll be entered into the prize. All you need to tell me is, in your comments, is whatever platform you're playing on. Having said that, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the Nova's Minmaxer episode. Now, as I said on my stream and I said on a couple of videos, I'm going to have to cover some frames which are not as interesting, but they are still a staple in the game and are pretty, powerful warframes to begin with. Nova is one of those frames. She's very easy to mod for, and the utility that she brings to a team is immense. You can use her for 2 specific kind of game modes, and because that covers so many different aspects of Warframe, you can actually use her effectively in many scenarios. In fact, Nova is one of those frames which I suggest to a lot of new players on my stream as one of the frames which they should kind of aim towards picking up as they're playing through their career in Warframe, just because of the utility that she provides. We all know M Prime's ability to slow down or speed up enemies is one of the most prized possessions of Nova itself, and the builds which I cover with Nova are specifically tied to those particular aspects of the build. Before we talk about Nova's builds, we're going to talk about the powers itself first. The first ability of Nova is called Null Star. The only important things you need to know about this ability is that it is affected by power strength, where power strength defines the damage of the orbs itself, and these orbs are also affected by body part multipliers. So if the Null Star orb hits a headshot, it's going to do extra damage. The orbs also do slash damage. The number of particles created by Null Star are affected by your power duration, and the attack radius is also increased by your power range. Those are literally the most important things to know about this. Other than that, it's not really an ability which you use outside of certain situations. Nova's second ability is called Antimatter Drop. This ability literally creates an orb which you control with your aiming reticle. The way this ability works is you shoot the orb, it'll absorb all the damage, and once it reaches the maximum amount of damage that it can store, upon hitting a solid object, all the damage that has been stored in the bubble will be unleashed as radiation damage and increased by up to 400%. The base damage, the contact damage, and the absorption multiplier are all affected by your power strength. The contact damage, as in where the orb hits, is affected by body part multiplier. So if you manage to hit that orb on someone's head, it'll be affected by the headshot multiplier. The explosion does not have any line of sight checks, and it does not scale based on how far the enemies are from the point of impact. So it'll do maximum damage at all ranges from the point of impact. The orb will only absorb pure damage, so status procs and critical attacks will not be absorbed by the antimatter drop bubble. It does not absorb any damage from other antimatter drop orbs as well, so that means you can't, set like a chain reaction going with those orbs. The explosion radius is set at 15 meters, and this cannot be changed by power range. Looking at the orb directly slows the orb down. Once you shoot it and it's fully charged, it speeds up, after which you guide it like a missile. Upon contact, it will do all the damage that it has stored. One antimatter orb will store up to 50,000 damage, so basically you can charge it up with one shot from a Tigris Prime, for example. Now, while this ability is extremely powerful in terms of the amount of damage that it can do, the only drawback is that you have to control the antimatter drop with your mouse, and the projectile itself is very slow. This is a problem in terms of applying DPS, because if it takes 20 years for the projectile to actually reach the enemy, there are many other ways you can actually apply the DPS faster. Having said that, you can actually use this effectively in a defense mission where all the enemies are going to be coming to one particular point anyway, so you can charge and just dump it on the point and kill everything as they come to the point. The third ability is Wormhole. This is pretty much a straightforward ability. You create a wormhole, you're teleported from the point of the creation of the wormhole to the point where it ends. The important bit is not actually the wormhole itself, but the augment. The way the augment works is that whenever you or a teammate uses the augmented wormhole, you get a 50% movement speed bonus. This is affected by duration mods. Because of the way you usually mod a Nova, you will end up having at least 1, maybe 2 mod slots free, in which case there is no reason not to use this wormhole augment and give yourself and teammates a speed bonus, providing extra utility for the team as well. The last ability is called Molecular Prime. This is Nova's ultimate and it is one of the most powerful abilities in the game. The way Molecular Prime works is when you cast it, it sends an outward flowing wave of antimatter particles which expands based on how much duration you have. So the more duration you have, the further the wave spreads outwards. The enemies will be doused in antimatter particles. These particles will either slow them or speed them up based on how much power strength you have available. Power duration also affects how long an enemy remains M-primed for. Power range affects the range of the explosions caused by M-prime. Based on how much power strength you have, M-prime also applies a speed debuff to enemies based on what sort of build you're running. If you're running a slow Nova, which has increased power strength, you can slow your enemies up to 75%. But if you're running a speed Nova using overextended and no power strength mods, you will speed them up instead by up to 30%. On the topic of crowd control and M-prime and how it affects it, think of M-prime as time dilation in Warframe. When you use a slow Nova, you reduce the enemy's speed by 75%. What that basically means is crowd control effects such as Radio Blind, Mirages, Prism, or any other such CC abilities, their duration also gets increased by 75% as well. This also works in the opposite way as well. So if you were to use crowd control abilities on an enemy that is sped up with a Speed Nova, the duration of those crowd control abilities gets reduced as well even further. You can take advantage of this, for example, if you were to use a mag, which is using a Fracture and Crush build with maximum duration, combining it with a slow Nova to stun lock entire groups of enemies as a form of CC. Now that I've talked about the abilities, let's talk about the actual builds. There are two main builds which I use for a Nova. The first is a Speed Nova and the second is a Slow Nova. Let's talk about the first build, which is the Slow Nova. The build revolves around the entire idea that you're going to be using enough power strength to slow down your enemies. Since the speed debuff is capped at 75%, at most you only need 145% power strength. There are two ways of achieving this. You can either combine Power Drift with Intensify, which takes 2 mod slots, or you can bite the bullet and take Transient Fortitude only, saving a mod slot for a different mod as well. Using Transient Fortitude means you're going to have slightly reduced duration, but it means you save on a mod slot as well. For that particular reason, I tend to use Transient Fortitude for this particular build. The way M-prime spreads is based on your power duration, so for this particular build, you want to stack as much power duration as possible. This is achieved by using Prime Continuity, Narrow-Minded, and Constitution together. Prime Flow and Quick Thinking will become your pseudo tank, where you have a massive energy pool, and Quick Thinking then becomes your tank by providing you that extra EHP. Streamline is there for extra efficiency. Stretch is there to increase the range of the explosions caused by M-prime when you kill an enemy. The last mod is Mobilize, which is used for moving from point A to point B faster. When it comes to arcanes and focus schools, Zanuric and Energize are the best choices for a Nova. You want to have as much energy regeneration possible, and those two provide that. There is an alternative to this build which you can use, where you can swap out Streamline and Stretch for Rush and Escape Velocity. Escape Velocity is the augment for the Wormhole, and that is usually the build which I take. The general playstyle for a slow Nova is pretty simple. When you go into a big room, you cast your 4, make sure all the enemies are slowed down. Primed enemies are susceptible to double damage as well when they're primed, and if they're grouped up, when you kill one of them, the explosion has the possible chance of being a chain explosion, so you can clear out rooms like that as well. Just that speed and damage debuff that enemies get is one of the biggest reasons why M-Prime is such a powerful tool in the Nova's arsenal. The second build is the Speed Nova. The Speed Nova revolves around the idea where you use a negative power strength to increase the movement speed and attack speed of enemies. Speed Novas are a fairly niche build where they use against primarily melee-based enemies. Infested are mostly melee-based enemies, so that's like the best faction to use this build against. This build particularly shines on maps such as Akkad and Kala Azar, which are infested defense maps. The purpose of this build is to speed up enemies so they come to the objective quicker so you can kill them faster and speed up the rate at which you do waves. That's the entire premise of this build. Technically, you can also combine this with a Disarm Loki to have the same effect, because you will end up disarming all the ranged enemies in the Grineer and Corpus factions and bring them within range to do whatever damage so you can kill them in entire groups. You also need to take into account that Corpus have nullifiers, for example. The way this build works is you use no power strength mods and you use overextended to give you that negative power strength. This brings your power strength to about 40%, which is the lowest you can get it. Since this build still revolves around the idea that you're going to be M-priming everything, for the speed effects, you still need duration. For that particular reason, you're using Prime Continuity and Narrow-Minded combined together. Quick Thinking and Prime Flow is still going to be your pseudo tank, and Streamline is going to be there for your efficiency. You can use Speed Drift for increasing your movement speed as well as your casting ability as well. You have one mod slot free in which you can put whatever mod of your choice, whether it's Handspray, whether it's the Wormhole Augment, whether it's Antimatter Drops Augment, or any other such mod. Your excellent slot is basically enemy sense, so you know where all the big groupings of enemies are so you can kill them efficiently. And your aura of choice usually ends up being Corrosive Projection against the Grineer, or anything else as you would like to take against the other factions. When it comes to arcanes and focus, Energize and Zenuric are still the best options for a speed Nova as well, so you kind of stick with those. And those are your two main builds for Nova. Like I said before, Nova's a pretty straightforward frame to build for. There aren't any major things which people need to know about. And I think that's pretty much it for this particular episode of the video. Thank you very much for watching again, and Happy New Year once again, guys. The next episode most likely will be for Mag, and it's going to be coming out in the week or the week after, whenever I get a chance to, because these next couple of weeks is going to be a little bit busy. TennoCon has been announced, and I am hoping to actually go to TennoCon. What that basically means is I have to pick up some extra hours at work, so I can kind of, fund my trip, so we'll see how that works out. Either way, thank you very much for being here, guys. As usual, it's Frozenballz. If you enjoyed what you saw, make sure you hit a like, a comment, a subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.